I was sitting on a park bench watching the warm sun break through the thick leaves of the trees. The day was calm, but an unknown anxiety wandered through me as if I was expecting something. And that's when I saw her. She appeared suddenly, as if she came from another world. A girl with red hair that shone in the sunlight, with green eyes that looked like they could see my thoughts. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Olivia stopped nearby, as if sensing my gaze. Her green gaze slid to mine, and I felt something inside me shake. It was a moment that would change my entire life. I decided to approach her. I took a few steps, and my heart beat faster with each step. Her eyes never left mine, and every look we shared was like a new secret we shared in silence. "Hello," I said, barely audible when I was very close. She smiled, and I felt that smile dispel all my fears. We started talking, but it was as if both were afraid to break the magic of the moment. We discussed small things: the weather, the park, favorite places in the city. Her every word was mesmerizing. Her laugh sounded like music. In that moment, I knew I wanted to hear that laugh again and again. We arranged to meet again, and I glanced at her as she left. The sun seemed brighter when she was gone, and I looked forward to our next conversation. We started meeting in the park every week. Every time I learned something new about her: her favorite books, dreams of travel, memories from childhood. Her life was mysterious, and I longed to know more. One evening we stayed up late. The sky gradually darkened, and we sat on the bench, lost in conversation. She was looking at the stars, and I saw the reflection of the starry sky in her green eyes. It was a magical moment. I felt it was more than just sympathy. Her every look, every word awakened new feelings in me. I dreaded it, but I couldn't ignore it either. It was the beginning of something big. With each meeting, I opened up more and more to Olivia. He told her about his dreams, fears, and memories, which he had not shared with anyone before. Her gaze was warm and supportive. She listened intently without interrupting, as if everything I said mattered to her. After one of these conversations, she unexpectedly took my hand. Her touch was gentle, and I felt the heat spreading inside me. I looked at our intertwined fingers, and at that moment the whole world seemed to disappear. "It's easy with you, Noah," she whispered, lowering her eyes. I didn't know what to answer because those very words, spoken by her voice, sounded like a dream. I just smiled, trying to hide my confusion and at the same time not let go of her hand. We continued to meet, day after day, week after week. Our conversations became deeper, and our meetings became longer. It seemed to me that now I had known her all my life, and at the same time she remained for me a mystery that I sought to solve. One evening, during the rain, we hid under an old oak tree. She laughed as the drops ran down her red hair, and I watched in fascination as the rain seemed to accentuate every feature of her face. I didn't know what beauty was until I saw it in that moment. The rain ended as quickly as it had begun, leaving fresh air and mist swirling around. We stood side by side, surrounded by this fog, and I felt the urge to hug her and never let her go. But instead, he just gently ran his hand through her hair. When we got home after that rainy evening, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Her image did not leave my thoughts, and I realized that it was no longer just a random sympathy. It was something much more, something that changed me. Our meetings continued, and I could feel my feelings for her only growing stronger. We discussed our plans for the future, joked, talked about our childhood dreams. Olivia shared her thoughts on life with such depth that I found myself falling more and more in love with every word she said. When we were walking by the river one evening, Olivia stopped and looked up at the starry sky. Her eyes shone with the reflection of stars, and I couldn't help myself. I told her how much she meant to me. She was silent, but her look spoke louder than words. She turned to me, and we stood in absolute silence, as if the whole world had fallen silent, leaving only the two of us. I gently touched her face and she closed her eyes, allowing me to feel her presence fully. The next day, when we met again, I felt that I could no longer keep my feelings to myself. She, too, seems to have been full of thoughts, for as soon as our eyes met, an invisible thread of understanding ran between us, revealing without words our mutual closeness. At that moment I felt that something so strong was emerging between us that it was impossible to ignore. We walked side by side in silence, and every step we took in this silence seemed important to me, like a continuation of the conversation we had begun without words. Her hand casually touched mine, and even though it was only a light touch, I felt my entire being pulsate with how close we became to each other without even saying a word. When we reached the lake, she stopped, looking thoughtfully into the calm waters that reflected the cloudless sky. I looked at her, and in that moment it seemed to me that she was everything to me. Silence, mystery, and maybe even the answer to all my questions that I never dared to voice. She suddenly turned to me, and looking at her, I noticed something special in her eyes. Calmness, which at the same time hid a shadow of anxiety. Olivia looked at me as if she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. At the same moment, I understood that she feels the same as I do. An indescribable desire to preserve every moment between us, to imprint it in memory forever. I came closer and, holding her hands, said that for me she has become the person without whom I can no longer imagine my life. My words seemed to dissolve all her fears, because a sincere, warm smile appeared on her face, which penetrated deep into my heart. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I felt her breathing become even and calm. This moment was so special that I was afraid to even move, so as not to accidentally destroy this silence that united us. I felt a sense of complete harmony when she was around, as if the whole world had finally become what it was meant to be. There were simple moments in each of our days: coffee on the terrace, walks through narrow streets, evenings together when we talked about everything and nothing at the same time. However, every such moment was special and unforgettable for me, because Olivia filled my life with warmth and light that I had not known before. Time passed quickly, and the summer was imperceptibly approaching its end. We both felt it, but neither of us dared to say it out loud. I didn't know what would happen next, but I was sure that no matter where she went, a part of me would always stay by her side. On the last day of summer, we met at the same place where we first met. Sitting on a bench in the park, we silently held hands, as if each of us wanted to preserve this moment, delay it in eternity. Olivia was silent, but her look spoke louder than any words. I kissed her hand, and in that moment I felt how our every meeting, every word and look merged into a single picture, a picture of our summer, which will forever remain with me wherever we end up. Her eyes glistened with tears, but they were tears of joy and gratitude for those months that will stay with us forever. I knew fall was coming, and even though the days were getting cooler, I couldn't come to terms with the thought that our summer was coming to an end. In every walk, every look at her, I saw joy and sadness at the same time. Our hands touched each other with special tenderness, as if we were trying to preserve every moment that time left us. One day we went to our favorite hill outside the city. The view from there was breathtaking. The forest, flooded with autumn colors, stretched to the horizon, and the sun descended low, coloring the sky in red and pink. I hugged Olivia, and we stood, looking at the sight, silently enjoying each other's presence. I slowly lowered myself onto the grass, pulled her by the hand, and we sat next to each other. She looked at me with such a soft smile that melted everything in me. "Noah, this summer has been a special one for me," she said quietly, and her words, filled with sincerity, made my heart skip a beat. She put her head on my shoulder, and we just sat there without saying a word. Her presence meant the world to me, and I knew that moment would stay with me forever. I could feel her warmth, hearing her heart beating in unison with mine. I hugged her even tighter, trying to stop the inexorable march of time. Our summer was giving way to fall, and although this cycle of nature was constant, I felt that something in our lives was beginning to change as well. Perhaps it was our destiny that was invisibly unfolding before us, step by step. We sat until the first stars appeared in the sky. Her green eyes reflected the light of the starry sky, and I again felt enchanted by her beauty, simplicity, and the light she gave to everything around. I had only one wish, that this moment would last forever. "The stars are so bright today," she whispered, smiling slightly. Her voice sounded like the soft whisper of the wind, and I felt a part of something bigger. We were looking at the starry sky, and I felt that at that moment there was nothing more important than the two of us and this big sky above us. Holding hands, we walked back to the city under the moonlight. She walked beside her, her red hair slightly blowing in the wind, creating a true glow around her. I thought about how our acquaintance had changed my life, and I realized that I would never be able to go back to my old self. We reached her house, and I held her hand in mine for a moment. She looked at me with a gentle smile, and I realized that now was not the time for goodbyes. There was silence between us, filled with everything we didn't dare say. I wanted to stay, but to know that it was the right goodbye. She suddenly hugged me, and I felt her heart beating next to mine. I returned her hug, trying to remember every moment, every breath of this moment. I realized that letting her go was going to be harder than I thought, but that was exactly what made our story so special. The next day, I felt the emptiness left over from that night. Her absence made me wander through familiar streets, remembering all our moments together. Every corner, every bench in the park reminded me of her laughter, which sounded warm, even on cool autumn days. I realized that without her the city had become quiet and almost alien. In search of peace, I returned to the same hill where we once sat together, looking at the starry sky. Sitting there alone, I could feel the evening slowly falling around me. I remembered every detail of her face, the softness of her voice, and my heart responded longingly, as if calling her back. We didn't see each other for several days, but every day of my life was filled with memories of her. I felt that our paths crossed for a reason, and that our feelings mattered. It may not have been planned, but everything we experienced was real, and I couldn't let go of those thoughts. Once I unexpectedly met her near a small coffee shop, where we once drank coffee together. She was standing by the window, looking thoughtfully at the street, and I suddenly felt as if all my thoughts had become reality. As I got closer, I couldn't help but smile as her presence gave off a warmth that could be felt even in the cold autumn air. When she saw me, her face lit up with a soft smile that melted all my doubts and fears. We hugged as if more than a few days had passed, and each of us understood how important this unexpected reunion was. I could feel her warmth fill every nerve in me. We decided to walk through the streets of the city, where autumn had already left its mark in the form of golden and red leaves covering the ground. When we spoke, we caught each other's every word, as if we were afraid to miss something important, and these small moments became priceless for us. We found a cozy place in the park and sat down on a bench, watching the sunset, which illuminated the sky crimson. She took my hand, and I felt how we both wanted to stop time, if only for this evening. The night fell slowly, covering us with a soft light, and every moment was like an unfinished dream. Out of the blue, she whispered that each of our moments was a gift, and that she had never felt so happy. I looked at her, trying to remember every detail of her face, and felt that it is true happiness, just to be next to a person who fills your life with meaning. Our evening lasted a long time, and the night caught us unexpectedly. The stars lit up in the sky one by one, and we walked side by side, silently enjoying this autumn silence. Her arm wrapped around mine was the only source of warmth in this coolness, and I felt that there was something eternal about this moment. Before we said goodbye, she looked at me again with her green eyes, which had already become the whole world for me. I felt that words were not needed now. Everything had already been said between us. We hugged, and I knew that nothing else in life could replace what we had. When I returned home, I felt that I had lost a part of myself, but at the same time I had gained something more. Her presence in my life left an unforgettable mark, and perhaps this story has only just begun. I knew one thing. Our meeting changed me, gave me a new world in which I will always remember our evenings, walks, and unforgettable summer. The following days passed slowly, and every little thing reminded me of her, her soft smile, her warm look, her gentle touches. I saw her image in every corner of the city, in the autumn colors of the park, where we spent many evenings, in cozy cafes where she laughed at my stories. The city seemed to lose some of its light when she was not around, and I realized how deeply she had woven into my life, filling every corner with warmth and meaning. I went back to our favorite spot in the park, where we always sat together on a bench under an old oak tree. This place was filled with her presence, as if even the trees remembered her voice and laughter. I sat on the bench, staring into the distance, and it seemed to me that every gust of wind brought her voice, barely audible, but so familiar and warm. I realized that even when we were separated, she left a part of herself with me, inscribing herself in this landscape, in these trees, in everything that surrounded us. After long days without her, I finally got up the courage to text her. Every word seemed difficult because I did not want to break the thin thread that connected us. I wrote that the city has become different without her, that each of our memories has left its mark, that I would like to see her again. As I sent the message, I felt a slight trepidation, a mixture of hope and uncertainty, because I didn't know how she would react or remember all the moments we had shared. After a while, she replied, and her message was as simple as mine, but full of depth. She wrote that she was thinking about me, that our meetings were unforgettable for her, that she would like to meet. These words returned to my heart again, the warmth that I felt next to her. I realized that even separation could not erase what had developed between us, this connection that was more than just a chance encounter. We agreed to meet at the same place where our story began, in the park near an old oak tree. I came early, anxious and reliving every moment we spent together. When I saw her from afar, my heart beat wildly. She was the same as I remembered her, but now her image was even more dear to me. It seemed that there was no one around except for the two of us, and even the autumn leaves swirling in the air created an atmosphere as if from my dream. When our eyes met, I saw the same warmth in her eyes as when we first met. She approached and stopped very close, looking into my eyes as if she wanted to find answers to all her questions. We stood like that for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity, and I realized that words were unnecessary. She smiled, and in her smile, I saw everything that I could not express in words. Our history, our memories, our warmth that did not fade despite the separation. She came even closer, and I hugged her gently, feeling her arms wrap around me. The whole world around us ceased to exist. There were only us and our feelings, which seemed stronger than ever. We were silent, but our silence was deeper than 1,000 words that could be said. In her presence, I felt whole, as if I had found my other half, my true home. When we moved a little away from each other, she took my hand and whispered that our summer will remain the most precious memory for her. I knew that these months would change everything for me forever. Every moment with her, every look and smile. We stood together, knowing that no matter where life took us, our story would always be a part of both of us, a part of who we are. When we said goodbye that evening, I felt that despite our separation, we remained together, bound by an invisible thread that neither distance nor time could break. I watched her walk away and felt that our story was just beginning, that we would have many more moments to cherish in our hearts. Our summer is over, but his warmth will stay with me forever. Weeks passed, and autumn gave way to cold winter. The first snow covered the city, giving it a fairy tale look, but at the same time increasing my feeling of loneliness. Each snowflake that fell to the ground seemed to me a reminder of those moments when Olivia and I walked the same streets. I found myself even now looking at everything through the lens of her presence. Every memory was warm, even in the middle of the winter cold. One evening I came home to find a letter in my mailbox. The handwriting was familiar. It was a letter from Olivia. I opened it, feeling my heart start to beat faster. Her words were simple, but so sincere that I felt as if she was standing next to me, telling me about her experiences and dreams. She wrote that she also remembers our summer, that our moments stayed with her, and that she hopes to meet again. Her letter made me realize how deeply she affected me. I sat for a long time, reviewing her every word, every thought. She was writing about the same memories I was thinking about, and it felt strangely close, even with the distance. The feeling that we are still united by an invisible thread that stretches through space and time. Inspired by her letter, I decided to respond by telling her about my experiences. I wrote about how the city changed for me, how every corner became dear and familiar thanks to her. I thanked her for our summer and for all the moments she brought into my life. These words flowed on paper easily, as if the heart dictated each sentence. A few days later, I heard back from her again. She shared her plans. She wrote about what she thinks about the future, about her dreams, about the fact that she wants to travel and see the world. Her words were filled with such light and inspiration that I felt proud of her for the way she confidently moves forward. I realized that no matter where we are, our hearts will always remain free and full of memories of our history. Since then, we began to exchange letters, telling each other about everything, about our everyday life, about new acquaintances, about small joys and discoveries. Every letter was like a meeting. Every word was like a greeting from a distant country. And although I didn't know where life would take me, I was sure, wherever I was, a part of me would always belong to the moments we created together. Our letters became more than just an exchange of ideas. Each letter was like a small journey, an immersion in each other's world, where even through the distance we continued to share the nearest and dearest. Olivia wrote about her city, about the small coffee shops she found, about her fascination with old bookstores, where she liked to spend time looking for something unusual. As I read her words, I felt as if I were there myself. I imagined her walking into an old shop, carefully flipping through the pages of books, looking up at the light pouring through the window, and somehow miraculously feeling her presence next to me. She told me how she starts every morning with a walk, even on cold days. Her words described the fresh winter wind blowing in her face, the crunch of snow under her feet, and the joy of the first ray of sunlight glistening on the frozen tree branches. I could feel how she loves these little moments that make her days unique. Every letter from her was filled with authenticity, like nature itself, and I realized for the first time how dear her thoughts and her way of looking at the world had become for me. I answered her about my life, about how I spent the last days, trying to find traces of her in every familiar place. I told how I passed by our favorite bench in the park, remembering each of our evenings when we sat next to each other, engrossed in conversation that lasted for hours. I described to her how from time to time I stopped by the window of the cafe where we drank coffee together, and in these little things I relive our summer. Her answer was short, but I felt that she too remembered it all with warmth and tenderness, as I did. Over time, we began to reveal our deepest dreams and desires to each other. She wrote about the countries she dreamed of visiting, about distant mountains, the streets of ancient cities, the smell of the sea air which awakened in her a thirst for new discoveries. She shared her thoughts about life, about how she wants to find something more than everyday life. I felt her irresistible desire to know the world and understood that it was important for me to know her every dream, because now I wanted to be a part of this world that she shared with me. Every time I received a letter from her, I could not contain my joy. It was like a new window into a world full of colors and sensations. Every word she wrote was precious to me, and I saved her letters, rereading them over and over again. In the evenings, when there was silence outside the window, I felt her words enveloping me, filling the void that appeared with her absence. They were my thread to her soul, a bridge between us that made me feel like we were never really apart. In one of the letters I wrote to her that I dream of returning to our park one day when the new summer begins. I described how I would love to sit next to her again, feel the warmth of her presence, and hear about her adventures and the new experiences she will have in this big world. I hoped that this wish would become a reality, that we could meet again, even if it was many months later. This letter was my confession that I could not forget her, and that our summer will forever remain a part of my soul. Her reply came a few days later, and when I opened her letter, I felt warm and excited. She wrote that she also dreams that one day we will meet again where our summer began. She admitted that this summer changed her, gave her a new perspective on the world, and also reminded her of the simple things that really matter more than anything else. Her words echoed in my heart, and I realized that we are connected not only by memories, but also by our dreams and hopes for the future. Time continued to pass, but our letters did not stop. Each letter was a new step in our story, a chapter we were writing together, despite the distance. And although we were separated by kilometers, her every word was like a hug for me, like a warm whisper that calms the soul. We became a part of each other's lives. Our connection became stronger than ever. In this separation, I realized that true closeness does not disappear, even when we are separated by thousands of roads. Eventually, spring came, and with its arrival came new hope. I learned from Olivia's letter that she plans to come to town this summer, the day we can see each other again in our park, on our bench. Her words awakened in me infinite joy and foreboding. I couldn't believe that our story could have a new beginning, that we would meet again where it all began. Our letters became a promise of a meeting that would soon become a reality. Summer has finally arrived, the long-awaited day of our meeting. I arrived at the park well before the appointed time, hoping to see her earlier. Sitting on our bench under the old oak tree, I felt an excitement that was overwhelming me. My heart was beating so hard that it seemed that every leaf on the tree, every flower around me sympathized with this moment of waiting. I looked into the alley, hoping to see her silhouette, and with each minute I felt time stretching into infinity, as if this day was the last test of our patience. Every minute seemed endless. My heart was pounding wildly, and I could feel each breath getting heavier. I remembered our entire summer, each of our letters, and the deep tenderness that connected us even at a distance. And just then I heard footsteps. When I turned around, I saw her standing at a distance, as if afraid to break the spell of the moment. She was the same as I remembered. Her red hair glistened in the sun, her green eyes shone, and a smile as gentle as the first breath of summer touched her face. She took a few steps towards me, and I stood up too, feeling the world stop around me. In that moment it was just the two of us, and even the wind that played in her hair seemed to have died down so as not to disturb the silence of our reunion. I felt my heart overflowing with emotions that cannot be expressed in words. She came closer, and I couldn't help but reach out, touching her fingers. It was a simple gesture, but it contained everything: our dreams, our letters, our waiting. As our fingers intertwined, I felt time stand still. Her hand was warm, as gentle as I remembered. She looked into my eyes, and I saw in them all that we had experienced, all those days when we wrote to each other, all our memories that did not allow us to forget even a second. Her eyes shone with sincerity, which made our connection deep and real. I felt that every meeting we had, every letter, and every moment of waiting was not in vain, and that this moment was the greatest gift imaginable. We sat together on a bench, and she told me about her travels, about all the places she had seen and the people she had met. Her voice was soft, and her eyes sparkled with delight as she described distant cities, high mountains, and tranquil seashores. I listened to her without taking my eyes off, admiring her every word, every movement. I felt like we were somewhere between reality and a dream, and I was ready to stay in this world forever, just listening to her voice. She took out a small souvenir from her purse, a pebble, smooth and shiny, which she had brought from the seashore. "I always thought of you when I was away," she said in a low voice, handing it to me. This small stone became a symbol of her journey, her thoughts, which, despite the distance, always returned to me. I accepted the gift, feeling its cool surface in the palm of my hand, and realized that this simple object meant more than any words. It had been a silent witness to her journeys, and would now stay with me, a part of her that would always be there. We continued to talk, lost in our memories and dreams as the sun slowly dipped below the horizon. Her voice was calm, and her every word penetrated to the very depths of my heart. I knew that this moment was special, that it would remain in my memory forever. She talked about how our letters became her support, how my every line helped her not to feel alone. In her words, I felt the depth of our connection, something that really cannot be erased or destroyed. With the onset of dusk, we could not part, as on the first day of our meeting. Her presence became for me an integral part of this place, this moment. We walked slowly along the alley, holding hands, listening to the sounds of the evening, which covered the park with peace and quiet. I felt that this was just the beginning of our new story, that now we would have even more moments together, more adventures, and more memories that will be forever with us. When we finally got to her house, we stopped, not daring to say goodbye. I felt that this was not the end, that from now on we would always be connected by our shared memories and dreams. She looked into my eyes, and I saw in her gaze a reflection of everything we had been through, everything that remained unsaid. We stood in this silence that hid 1,000 words and just held hands as if we didn't want this moment to go away. I stood in front of her house, not daring to take the last step to say goodbye. We did not take our eyes off each other, as if everyone wanted to remember this moment to the smallest detail. Her face was illuminated by the soft light pouring from the windows of the house, and in her eyes I saw a reflection of everything we had experienced. Tenderness, gratitude, and something else could be read in her gaze. Perhaps the hope that this farewell would not be the last. Her hand slowly squeezed mine, and I felt our fingers intertwine in a gesture that spoke louder than words. I didn't want to let go of her hands, feeling that this moment was too precious to end. She leaned closer, and I heard her soft whisper that was like a melody. "Thank you for everything, for every moment, for every letter, for every thought that always brought me back to you." Her voice sounded soft, and every word was full of deep feeling. I realized that these words would become my treasure that I would always carry with me, regardless of what lay ahead. Her words caused a whirlwind of emotions in me, and I answered her in a low voice, trying to convey the full depth of my feelings. "You have become a part of my life, my memories and dreams. I will always remember you, wherever I am, and I will cherish every moment we spent together." My words were sincere, and in that moment I felt our hearts beating in unison. Her face lit up with a quiet smile full of warmth, and I knew those words would stay with both of us for the rest of our lives. We stood in a silence that held more words than could be expressed, I slowly hugged her, and she responded by holding me tightly. This hug was not just a gesture. It contained all our hopes, all our memories and promises for the future. I could feel her heart beating next to mine, and I knew that this bond, this moment would live on in me, even when we were far from each other. We slowly let go of each other, and she smiled at me with the last warm look that I wanted to remember forever. In that smile was our whole story, from our first acquaintance to this moment of parting. She took a step back, and I felt something inside me shake, but at the same time was filled with peace. Her image stayed with me, and I knew that this evening, this moment would remain in my heart forever. She turned and walked slowly to her house, while I stood watching her silhouette disappear into the dusk. Every step she took seemed to reverberate in my heart, leaving behind an exciting trail. I couldn't look away, feeling her become a part of the quiet summer night. Her figure disappeared behind the door, but I was left with a feeling of warmth and tenderness that was now a part of me. I began to slowly make my way home, feeling strangely calm and light. In that moment, I realized that our meetings and our summer have become a part of me forever. I returned, enveloped in memories of us, of every walk, every letter, and every moment that bound us so tightly. And even though we parted ways again, I knew that our connection would live on because it was more than just a memory. It became a part of who I am. At home, I sat by the window and looked into the night sky, where the stars twinkled like echoes of our memories. Everything around seemed as quiet as in our summer evenings. I felt the warmth of our moments enveloping me, and this warmth was with me like an invisible charm. I realized that our hearts will always be connected this summer, no matter what lies ahead. This evening remained for me a light that will illuminate my steps. I sat by the window for a long time, letting the memories fill every cell of my heart. Listening to the silence of the night, I remembered our every look, every touch, and every word, spoken and unspoken. The feeling of her presence enveloped me, as if she was really there, and at that moment I knew that her imprint would remain in my life forever. Our conversations, our walks, each of those days together, all this has become an integral part of me, a part of my inner world, where I can always return to feel her warmth. Finally, feeling calmness fill me, I got up, walked over to the desk, and opened the drawer where all her letters lay. I slowly took them out one by one, rereading the familiar lines again. Her handwriting was so clear, neat, and I felt every word as if it was being spoken to me by her voice. Every letter contained a piece of her, her thoughts, her dreams, everything that connected us during those long months. These letters became my treasure, a reminder that our summer was real, that even through separation we found a way to stay close. Rereading her letters, I noticed how our words were intertwined into a single story. Her memories and my answers, her thoughts about life and my dreams. All this became the language we used to communicate, despite the distance. There was a warmth and understanding in every letter that could not be found anywhere else. It was a connection that was deeper than any conversation we could have had. I felt that even after this summer, after saying goodbye, we will always remain in each other's hearts. The next morning I went to the park where we first met. The sun was just rising, flooding everything around with a soft light that reminded us of our summer mornings when we met here, sharing plans for the day. I sat down on the same bench, looking at the old oak, which became a silent witness of our history. Its branches, which were now covered with green leaves, seemed to hide all our secrets, all our unforgettable moments. And even though she wasn't around, I could feel her presence in every breath of wind, in every ray of sunlight that filtered through the branches. I sat, watching the life of the park, and remembered how we once sat here together, laughed, told each other the most secret things. Every sound around, the rustling of leaves, the singing of birds, reminded her of her. I closed my eyes, letting these sounds and memories wash over me. And in that moment, It felt like the past came alive, that she was sitting next to me, smiling and listening to my thoughts, which were now hers alone. Our meetings became memories, but those memories were so vivid that it seemed I could reach out and feel her presence again. I thought about how each of our memories, each letter and each moment together, became a teacher for me. They taught me to appreciate the little things, to notice the beauty around me, not to be afraid to dream and feel. The feeling she left in my life became my light, which I now carry with me. I realized that no matter how our future will turn out, I will always be grateful that we met, that she was there. This summer taught me to love in a way that I have never loved before, purely, deeply, sincerely. In that moment, I realized that our paths may never cross again, but what we had will always stay with me. Every moment of our summer, every word we wrote to each other, will be with me forever, like a kind of invisible talisman. I stood up as I left the park, feeling that despite everything, my heart was filled with gratitude and love. And now, moving forward, I will keep this feeling as a precious gift she left me. I walked slowly, watching the world around me live its life, and there was peace in my heart. The sunlight played on the leaves, and the warm wind that gently blew on her face made her feel as if she was still around. I knew that a part of that summer remained in me, and that even years later I would look back on those memories as the brightest moments of my life. My story with Olivia has become a part of me, a part of my life, my soul, and now I moved on, knowing that there would always be a place in my heart for her, for our summer, for everything that made us who we are. The summer ended, but life continued, as if nature itself pushed me to move forward. With each new day, I understood more and more that our story became a source of inspiration and strength for me. I began to see the world in a new way, to notice details that previously seemed unimportant. Now every morning was filled with gratitude, and every little thing mattered. Even an ordinary walk turned into a moment in which I saw beauty and meaning. And all this I thanked her, Olivia, and our summer, which changed me forever. Autumn came, and I began to spend more time in nature, looking for an echo of our summer. One day I returned to the same hill where Olivia and I had sat during one of our most beautiful evenings. The leaves on the trees had already begun to change, covering themselves in gold and red, and I felt these colors accentuate the feeling of warmth and comfort that remained in my heart. I stood at the top of the hill, looking into the distance, and again, though she was far away, I could feel her presence, in every breath of wind, in every color of autumn. On my way home, I stopped by an old coffee shop that Olivia and I used to frequent together. Her smell was the same as always, a light aroma of freshly roasted coffee beans that filled the air. I went inside, chose the same table by the window, and felt the memories wash over me again. I ordered a coffee, and when the first sip burned my lips, it was like going back to the days when we sat here, laughing, sharing dreams. At that moment, I realized that such places keep memories, like living witnesses of our history. It seems to me that every autumn day brought me something new about her, about us, about how we have changed. Once I met our mutual acquaintances, and although they did not know the whole story, in the conversation I felt that now we have something more in common. Everyone who knew us became a part of this story. They kept the memories that Olivia and I left behind in this city. Their smiles and words reminded me of the lightness and joy that filled our every day. This connection, this invisible bridge between people, remained like a magic thread that continues to connect us, even in separation. One evening I came home and decided to read her letters again. Every word now had a new meaning. Every line revealed something deeper. I realized that these letters contained not only her words, but also her soul, her dreams, her hopes. And now, reading them, I seemed to find new pages of our history, those that remained invisible when we were just starting our journey. In her letters, I felt how our love continues to live, how it permeates every moment, every memory. It was a book I would never be able to close. Winter came sooner than I expected, and I met the first snow on the same road we used to walk together, holding hands. The snowfall was quiet, as if the sky itself had sprinkled the earth with white petals, covering it with a clean, pristine layer. I stopped and took out of my pocket a pebble that she had once given me. His surface was cold to the touch, but this simple gesture brought warmth to my heart. Snow was falling, and I stood holding a pebble, feeling how the memory of her, of our summer, warms me even on this frosty day. When I got home, I lit a candle and placed it near the window, where the soft light danced, casting shadows on the walls. I sat by the window, watching the snow slowly cover the city, and I thought about Olivia again. Her image appeared in my imagination as bright as in the summer. I imagined how she could sit next to me, talk about her new adventures, share dreams. It was a fantasy, but I could feel it bringing me peace. I realized that her presence in my life became so strong that even in her absence, she remained with me. Winter has become a time for introspection, and I've felt these memories continue to sustain me, helping me get through the long, cold days. Every evening, when I looked at the snowflakes dancing outside the window, I remembered our walks, our summer, all the moments we had together. It was like the warmth of a fire that never goes out. I knew we were separated, but the light she left in my heart continued to illuminate my life. I kept her in my memory like the most precious treasure, and I felt that our history, our connection remained alive in every breath I took. The days of winter passed slowly, and with each passing day I felt the memories of Olivia sink deeper into me, like a part of my soul. When severe frosts came to the city, I found unusual strength and calmness in myself, as if her presence gave me invisible protection from the cold. Every morning I went for walks through familiar streets, looking at the snowy landscape that looked like a fairy tale. The white blanket of snow on the roofs of the houses, on the branches of the trees, on the benches in the park, where we once sat together, was so gentle and quiet that I felt as if every step reminded me of her light touches and gentle voice. I often returned to the old park, to our favorite bench under the oak tree, even when the frost penetrated to my bones. As I sat there, I gazed into the snowy immensity, remembering that warm summer day when I first saw her. I remembered how the sunlight then fell on her red hair, how the green of the trees framed her face, giving her a charm, as if she were made of the same light. And now, in the winter cold, I was sitting on the same bench, but she was no longer nearby. And although her physical presence was absent, she left behind more than one could imagine. Her imprint remained in every leaf, in every branch, in every ray of light that broke through the gray winter sky. Time passed, and even as the snow began to melt, I felt that our memories stayed with me. The first signs of spring began to appear in the air, the faint smell of fresh earth, the first small sprouts of green that broke through the remnants of snow. And in this period of rebirth, I realized again that our summer with Olivia is not just in the past, it lives on in each day that comes. Every new spring would now be associated with her, and although I did not know where she was now or how her life was going, I knew that we would forever remain a part of each other. When spring came in full force, I suddenly received an unexpected letter. Seeing the familiar handwriting on the envelope, my heart began to pound wildly, and my hands almost shook as I opened it. It was a letter from Olivia. She wrote that, traveling to new places, she felt how our memories always remain with her, how they became a part of her own path for her. She remembered our long evenings, our conversations, and even those moments of silence when we just sat next to each other, feeling each other. Her words were full of gratitude and warmth, and I realized that our story lives not only in me, but also in her. Reading her letter, I felt my heart fill with unusual joy. Her words were so sincere that they seemed alive, as if she was actually sitting next to her, speaking them in a soft voice. She talked about her new discoveries, about how each new country brought her something new and unforgettable. But among all these adventures, she always remembered our summer, which remained a point of peace and inspiration for her. Her words were like music, and I felt that every line carried an echo of our story. Every paragraph was a piece of our dream that continued to live. I decided to answer her letter by describing to her how our summer continued to live in every moment of my life. I told her how I pass by our park, remembering our days together, how I see her image in every corner of the city, how her smile and her words continue to inspire me. I thanked her for everything, for her presence in my life, for the fact that she became my muse, for the fact that her love and our memories became what gives me the strength to move on. Discovering the world and my feelings for it. It was a confession that now took on new meaning, because it was my way of telling her that our story was more than a memory. A few days later, I received another letter from her. She wrote that she wants to visit the same city this summer, that she dreams of returning to the place where it all began. Her words brought back to my heart the hope I had almost lost. I felt the same again as I did that summer when we first met. There was more to her words than just the promise of a meeting. It was an opportunity to start a new chapter, an opportunity to see how our paths could intertwine again. I couldn't believe that after all we'd been through, we might still have a chance to continue our story. The days dragged on slowly, each of them becoming a part of my anticipation, but also a reminder that I would soon see her again. This anticipation brought a new sense of purpose to my life, and I began each morning with the thought that I had the opportunity to experience her presence again. I continued to walk through our favorite park, stopping at the same places where we spent so much time together. Every bench, every corner seemed to keep the warmth of her smiles and barely audible whispers of our summer together. One day, when there were only a few weeks left before her arrival, I decided to prepare something special, a small album in which I collected all our letters, photos from those days, and even small sketches that I made in moments when I felt her absence especially strongly. In each sheet I left a little bit of my heart, a little bit of memories that will never disappear, even when they are turned over. It was a way to keep our story alive, a way to tell it more than words could. While preparing this album, I felt that our story continues even when we are in different parts of the world. Finally, the day came when she was supposed to arrive. I couldn't contain my excitement. My heart was beating wildly every second I got closer to the station. So much time had passed, but it seemed that this separation only strengthened our bond. I stood in the crowd, looking at each face as it exited the carriage, and felt every second of the wait become a part of our story. And suddenly, among the sounds of the train and human voices, I saw her. She stood there as before, but even more beautiful, as if her travels had given her even more light and strength. Our eyes met, and at that moment the whole world disappeared, remaining somewhere in the distance. I couldn't stand it and went to her, feeling how each step resonated in my heart. She also began to walk towards him, her smile growing wider with each passing moment. When we were close to each other, I couldn't help myself and hugged her tenderly, feeling her arms wrap around me. Her presence was so real that everything around became distant, unimportant. We hugged without saying a word, but this silence was more than enough to convey all our feelings, all our thoughts that had accumulated over the long months. We slowly moved away from each other, our faces lit up with smiles so sincere and warm, it was as if everything around us disappeared, leaving only the two of us. I looked at her, looking into her green eyes that told me so much, about her travels, about her dreams, and even about the moments when she thought about us. Her eyes seemed to have all the strength and warmth of our summer together, as if no time had passed. We didn't utter a single word, because our whole story was already between us, living in our eyes and the quiet understanding that this moment belonged only to us. Later, we went for a walk through the familiar streets, enjoying the warmth of the summer day. The conversations flowed as easily as before, and our voices seemed to blend back into the melody we started last summer. She talked about her travels, about the people she met, and how our memories supported her in the most difficult moments. Her every word was for me like a journey into her world, into those new horizons that she opened for herself, and I felt how our lives, our stories, were again intertwined into a single one, giving a new depth to our connection,